to the lecture by Karl Staudinger, and he's going to talk about the legal foundations, the benefits and the drawbacks of cooperatives, and maybe also talk about the situation in Austria. The floor is yours.
Christian, vielen Dank. Und ja.
And we will be taking down the rest of your questions and then wrap them up at the end of the day, at the end of this meeting.
Yeah. Hello. Also, my first
Yeah.
words in English, and then as Christian, I will continue in German. It's exciting to be in a conference that has international guests, and congratulations to the organizers to bring people together to talk, to think about cooperatives. Okay, das war's auch schon. Jetzt spreche ich Deutsch weiter.
So much for my German introduction. English introduction, I will continue in German. It was quite interesting what we heard from Christian Casara. He first mentioned Mondragon as an example, and one important event for the formation of our Association of Cooperatives. We were founded in December 2016. We were recognized then by the Ministry of the Economy as an audit association. And one major event at the time was in May 2015, and there we had a symposium on solidarity management. And a high-level functionary of Mondragon attended the symposium and he held a workshop. I don't remember his name. His name was Michele. I can't remember his family name. But of course, many people are called Michele. And then we had Connie Gellenberg there. And from Croatia, we had a young lady who works in a cooperation association there. Okay. I think that's a very good opportunity to speak about the founding document of our organization. And before I go into the details, I think that might be of relevance to you. At the Congress back in time, we formulated a manifesto for a solidarity management movement. The text was developed during the symposium. It was an idea that actually cropped up during the meeting, and we felt we needed such a document. And the last act in that symposium was that in the final plenary, we edited the text and we then adopted it by a show of hands. Perhaps some introductory words to start with. There's a crisis of trust in our present system. We were founded after the financial crisis, in the wake of the financial crisis, and the cooperative was considered by us as the legal form of solidarity management. That's what we called it in the document. We referred to that, and that was our assessment back in time, that there's a big yearning of more and more people, a growing number of people who want to contribute their passion, their knowledge, their abilities, their talents to make the world a better one. Well, it sounds quite trivial, but I do think that that was a major concern of many people at the time. And many say in order to do that, we need to transfer and transform our economy, and let's form and set up companies that are different, that can show us how economy works. Well, that is not my task here today, but that was a background idea related to the history of our association. I will now move on and talk about, I'll try and share my screen and inform you about the legal basics of cooperatives. Just a second. And I will start with two provisos that are quite characteristic of the legal form of a cooperative. And these are quite substantive elements. The legal requirements and the obligations on cooperatives. If you want to set up a cooperative in Austria, you need to become a member of an association. And that was the reason why we set up our own association. As we said, that there are some people who want to act along cooperative lines in Austria, and they are not covered and not attracted by the assisting associations, and this is why we wanted to reach out to them. And there's a mandatory requirement to become part of such an association. For the matter of completeness, for the sake of completeness, I have to add that you can go to court and file for being exempted from this obligation, but only if you have been declined by an existing association. So if you wanted to join and they said, no, we don't want you, we don't accept you, then you can go to court and apply for a waiver. And it's called the Revisionsverband, or literally translated as an audit association or review association, and that means that every other year the cooperative must subject itself to a review by the association. Review or audit is an audit for economy and also an audit whether the cooperative acts within the line of its statutes and its targets and in compliance with those. I now move on to the major provisions, the core provisions that are characteristic of a cooperative. The core of each cooperative is a mission. A cooperative is a legal form that obliges it to promote gainful activity and the economy of its members. And when I say economy, it's consumer cooperatives that are meant actually for people to obtain their needs more cost efficiently than would be possible otherwise, namely how they run their households. And that means that a cooperative is targeted and aims at supporting its members in their professional activities. Ever since 2006 or 2008, I'm not quite sure when, you can also set up a cooperative that promotes the social activities of its members. So these are the admissible criteria relating to its mission. In contrast to a limited company, with a limited company, the main purpose is, or a stock corporation, companies limited by shares, that is one thing, and then we have the partnerships on the other hand, but cooperatives are neither one nor the other. So with a corporation, a company limited by shares, it is the purpose of those who contribute money to the company. They want it to grow and to become more. Well, of course, there are many limited companies, so many limited companies, different forms. There's even benevolent limited companies, but in general, from its basic structure, that would be one major difference, namely that the cooperative promotes its members in what they do, in their activities, and corporations promote the members only to the extent indirectly that capital is to provide and generate a return, a yield. I can skip that quite briefly. It's a mandatory element of the articles that you specify the object of your cooperative. I said there's this mission which is set out and spelled out in law, and the articles of this corporation is a founding document. It's a sort of deed, a contract which the members enter into, and it would be synonymous for a cooperative agreement or articles or statute. It's all the same. So you have to specify the purpose, the object, And then you have to designate what exactly the cooperative will be doing to reach its objectives. What about membership in a cooperative? How is that organized? Who can become a member of a cooperative? How many members do we need as a minimum? The minimum number is 2 members for a cooperative. In general terms, membership in a cooperative is reserved to persons who would benefit from the activities, and could benefit from the activities and from the mission of the cooperative. That would be the main benefit of membership. And is the purpose of a cooperative to primarily carry out its activities and its tasks through its members, if possible. So let's assume you would be setting up a cooperative of people, it has been mentioned, who would repair their bicycles together or create cost-efficient possibilities for buying and repairing bicycles. Then the cooperative normally could offer and carry out those repairs only for its members. Normally. I said normally, but if you explicitly state that in the articles or statutes, then the cooperative can also do business with non-members. And in fact, it is true that this is the case with the major cooperatives in Austria. And in reality, this is something that our member cooperatives also have business relations with third parties and outside people. Another thing, people become members in cooperatives who are not affected by its missions, who don't qualify, are not eligible for being promoted. But they say, let's join, let's become a member, we want to support the cooperative, we'll subscribe for a share, and in this way we support the cooperative. And this is nothing I've put down on the slides, but that is something, how should I put it? That's a main difference between an association and a cooperative, namely that a cooperative may distribute profits, and if you have
dann dürfen denen auch Gewinne, wenn die Genossenschaft gewinnt.
They are entitled to taking out some of the profits. And that is not possible in an association, because an association is not for profit, it's non-profit oriented. And although it's not forbidden, that is often a misunderstanding, it's not forbidden for an association to engage in entrepreneurial activities and to manage and operate companies, but an association is not allowed to distribute profits to its members. Another important criterion is if an association is dissolved, the remaining assets will not be disseminated among the members, but must be channeled to any non-profit purpose. Perhaps I have time to answer any questions on that later on after my presentation. So, every member must subscribe for at least one share in the cooperative. And this share is an instrument, a tool of a cooperative to generate equity or to actually have equity when it is founded. In the articles, we will have a provision on how high this equity, this capital will be, and you have to give a careful thought as to how high that should be. Sometimes it would make sense to have a higher capital endowment and sometimes less. But there is no lower threshold, simply that zero is not possible. The law does not prescribe for any minimum capital endowment for a cooperative. What is interesting in a cooperative, if you compare it with a limited company, is that it's flexible regarding the admission of members. This is something I've addressed and explained when I talked about membership, and that is very important to be aware of that. Accepting a new member into the cooperative is a decision or resolution adopted by management, and it's very simple to do, can be done easily and quickly. For a limited company, a new shareholder requires the drafting of a notarial deed, and then that requires filing with the company's register.
Wo die Flexibilität der Genossenschaft als Rechtsform hervorsticht.
Shares can be actually terminated. You can terminate your membership in a cooperative, and then you can terminate your share, and then this is returned to you, it's paid out to you. But you can subscribe for several shares and then terminate only some of the shares. So if you have a cooperative, it could be set up and founded, and members pay and subscribe to the shares for the startup phase, and once the company is fledgling and making profits, they can terminate the shares, and this gives you a funding instrument that is actually that works quite well without complication. However, there is one limitation, one proviso, and we as a not-for-profit association like that, some don't. The share is returned at the value it has, the current value. So what you paid in, you will get out at most and not more. Because if the cooperative is facing difficulties and equity and the capital has been used up by losses, then you will be only getting back the non-used part of the share. It sounds complicated. Maybe it's easier to explain to say if you have the capital and it's been reduced by 50% by losses, then if you terminate, you will be getting only 50% of the worth of your share when you leave. That is certainly an interesting point. Perhaps to put it graphically, your share is absolutely unsuited to be used for speculation. You can have reserves, millions of reserves, but if you leave the cooperative, which you founded, where you were a co-founder, and if you leave it, you want to get your share back, you will be getting back the nominal value of what you paid in. So the amount you paid in, you'll be getting out. I have not mentioned that for the disbursement of the share, there is a blocking period of 1 year, but maybe that is too specific for today's presentation. Perhaps one other point that something we need to understand if we want to understand how cooperatives work. All cooperatives in Austria, to my knowledge, and that's about 1600, all of those Austrian cooperatives are cooperatives with limited liability. And what are the liability provisions? In the case of bankruptcy, the members are liable up to the amount of their share, so that will be lost in case of bankruptcy. And if necessary to satisfy the creditors, they have to contribute another share in the amount of the value of their share, meaning a supplementary obligation to pay up. But that is quite controversial and disputed, and maybe the law will be changed even this year. Okay. The bodies of a cooperative, Christian Casara mentioned the word self-governance, self-administration, self-management. I'm a lawyer, and as a lawyer, I normally deal with the formal aspects of self-government and self-administration. And throughout my professional life, I've been dealing with those very issues. But of course, you could have the feeling that is a bureaucratic requirement. If you look at the organizational structure of a cooperative, the point is that all decisions can be verified and will be documented. And that is not always easy and not always a matter of fact. Often I find it's uplifting when I attend meetings to set up a cooperative, a new cooperative, and then all the words are said, a motion is submitted, an application is filed, and then they find out how things work. And there's many things you have to learn if you set up a cooperative, if you want to run a company or manage a business jointly. It's a simple structure, similar in all legal forms. You have a management board, you have a meeting of shareholders, and the meeting of shareholders is that very place where self-government happens. You have the management board being elected, they are accountable to the members, the general members, meeting of shareholders, and this is where they decide on the appropriation of profits. I now move on to one important point. This is where the audit report, the review report, is being dealt with. I think I did say a couple of words about this review or audit when I familiarized myself with the topic of cooperatives. I felt that this review or audit requirement was a burden. And yes, it's a lot of red tape and it costs a lot of money, but still. But still, there's a positive aspect to all that, namely that this audit element or review element actually keeps the cooperative going with this requirement of having this audit every 2 years, at regular intervals, and an outsider's view, an outsider's feedback of how things are going. This might help positively running the cooperative. And then some non-legal points on how cooperatives are set up and organized. What is important, what is essential, is that the members get along with one another. It sounds so trivial, but still, that is not always easy to achieve. And I myself, I admit it, I am a member of one such organization, and it's always a big challenge to get along with others. There are often phases where people actually are at loggerheads. Yes, then we have the principle of one person, one vote. And that is the third element of flexibility in cooperatives. You can design it in different ways. Normally, you have one member, one vote, but alternatively, if you don't want it, you could have voting rights depending on shares or capital contributions. Or you can have a system of limited shares, or let's say 2 shares, 1 vote, or various different forms that can be applied here. A voting model that is a sub-form of the one person or one member, one vote is the franchise system, which we use in 1/3 of our cooperatives. I won't go into detail as time is running fast. If you want to set up and form a cooperative, what do you need to do? This needs to be registered in the company's registered, and for that you need to have an assurance from an audit or review company that they will be accepting you in their association. They will first be reviewing the articles of the corporation, whether they are in compliance with the law, and then they will be looking at the business plan to be submitted by the cooperative before they accept you as a member. And if there is a justified reason for that cooperative to be run. I think I've spent quite some time, and a little bit is left of my time for questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Staudinger. A couple of questions have come in the chat. The first question, Tanya from Serbia.
Be a viable solution for freelancers seeking to become workers rather than entrepreneurs? Ich habe also meine Antwort quasi im Chat.
So the answer I gave in the chat was that we will be getting a presentation by Coopcycle and Lecton where exactly those points will be addressed. But perhaps you would like to pick that up. Well, we're very proud of Lecton. They will be giving a presentation today. I'm sure that Bernd Haberl and his team will provide an excellent answer to the question has been asked. And then a question. What about interest payments on shares? A cooperative? Or let's put it in different ways. It's for the general meeting of shareholders or members to decide how they're going to distribute the profit. The only thing is there needs to be equal treatment of all members, and profit that is to be distributed must be distributed on a pro rata basis on shares held. But maybe I didn't get the question. Mr. Franz Gieder asked this question. A follow-up? My question was, what I remember is that if you have a cooperative, there is no distribution like with companies limited by shares, but there's an interest distributed on shares. So there's not a payout? No. A cooperative is allowed to pay out its profits. Maybe this is just a discrepancy in the terminology between the different cooperatives, Raiffeisen and others, and they might use the word interest-bearing, although it refers to profits. So if you say that there is a profit made by the cooperative and it distributes it, an amount X, to the members, the full amount or a part of the amount, then the distribution model classically would be you divide it up by the number of shares, and depending how many shares there are, this results in the amount of disbursement. And then a follow-up question. In Austria, how do you see the large cooperatives? And do they comply with the relevant regulation, Raiffeisen and Volksbank? Well, before I attended this meeting, I would not say anything negative about the competitors, our rivals. Well, I think it's safe to say that you associate a big conglomeration with Raiffeisen. And then there's rural cooperatives in Austria that are under pressure because they are finding it difficult to comply with the requirement of the corporation. There's many books on that. There's lots of literature on that. Holzinger wrote a paper or a book on that. I don't really deal with those issues. My concern is to see that our member cooperatives get the best possible service and that we actually assist them in formation. Two further questions. One from the chat. We heard about cooperatives where there's no right of co-determination, let's say in housing. Yes, there are some elements that are quite mind-boggling. Actually, a colleague from my chess club showed me the articles of his own cooperative, and he would have loved to take part and have a say in the decisions. But then again, systems are different, cooperatives are different, situations are different. In some cases, we have the meeting of members that is actually a meeting of delegates, and those delegates are appointed at a moment in time when you should be knowing that this information is to be found there and located there and there, to know that you should be appointing a delegate who will represent your interests in the meeting. Yes, this may happen. So it's quite confusing. But then we have housing cooperatives that work well and function perfectly, as Christian told us. And then I can tell you that my own chairman is a member of a housing cooperative, and there things work quite well. But things are handled very differently, and it always depends on the persons involved. Thank you very much for that. And then a very last question. Hello. I would have a follow-up question. Well, you said it's a matter of interpretation how you handle these things in the articles. But my question is, what is it that makes cooperatives democratic or more democratic? It's not the legal framework, is it? Correct. I fully share your view. A cooperative is a lot more flexible in many different issues, but a good democratic company is something you can set up also as a limited liability company. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I think it would not make sense to say that only cooperatives can be organized along democratic lines. The legal requirements are good for a cooperative, but the members, the shareholders of a limited company can interact in a manner that you could call based on solidarity. Thank you very much for this clarification. And then my last question. If you want to do international business, or is there a European cooperative? Well, we have a strange solution. We have a Societas Cooperativa Europea, SCE, and we are quite proud that the first SCE is registered in Austria. It was set up in Austria, our power co-op, and they deal in electricity or power. However, that is not a legal form that is used all across Europe, but our power is registered with the Vienna Commercial Court. It had its registered seat in Austria, and in fact there's 27 forms of SCEs. There's a joint legal framework. It's not as flexible as the Austrian law would allow, with a minimum capital contribution required, unlike in Austria, and more limitations when it comes to voting rights. But the only requirement is that the members must come from at least 2 members of the European Union. Well, that's similar to an SEE, an European Stock Corporation. So thank you very much